So, are you an American? I'm an American, and I love my country. But what I don't love are politicians. Why don't I love politicians? I'll tell you why. Because they do their campaigns, and they promise this, and they promise that. But at the end of the day, they do not actually explain to the American public that in order for their, campaign promises to happen, they have to have majority vote in the Senate, in Congress, all that. So they don't actually have the power to, follow through on their promises. So that's point number one. Point number two. These politicians, they seem to think that we work for them, but we don't. They work for us. So where did that go wrong? Just curious. Term limits. Why aren't there any? There's term limits on our president, to the point where if President Trump wanted to, in 2028, run as a VP, he can't. Because if the president at that point, and he was VP, if the president, something happened to him or her, then the VP would then take, that role. So that sucks. But why don't we have term limits for Senate, Congress, governors? Okay. Do we have term limits for mayors? I don't know that we do. There needs to be term limits to allow other people with better ideas, with better fortitude, who aren't misled by the money that's, the lobbyists and all that stuff. We need people with integrity in office, okay? And why can't the American people prosecute politicians when they don't put our best interest at heart? They don't put our best interest at the front lines. Isn't that why we put them in office? Is that they will work for what we want as Americans? So the president has term limits, but the vice president doesn't have term limits. I find that incredibly fascinating. Make this make sense. It says Congress, Senate, and House. No term limits. Members of the House serve unlimited 2 terms, and senators unlimited 6 terms. Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that an oxymoron? Just saying. You're saying on one hand it's unlimited. On the other, it's saying that there's 2-year terms. What? The whole point of terms is there's a statute involved. But they continue to just be elected in the same position. Have they done anything different for you? Just curious. Has anything they have ever talked about come true? Have they ever fought for you? Especially nowadays, they're too busy fighting for the illegal people they allowed into the country for a vote. Just saying. And this is for educational purposes only. Yeah, okay. If you believe that, then you got problems. Okay. And federal judges, no term limits. Appointed for life during good behavior. That's fascinating. Federal judges, no term limits. Do you think that federal judges should have term limits? You know what I think? I think there's a lot of compromised judges in our country. And if you're a judge and you're watching this, be offended by it. Because here's how I see that. If you have, take Nevada, Las Vegas, just a plethora of traffic violations. There's people out there with multiple DUIs. Now, why do they have multiple DUIs? Because the judges won't enforce the law. What a concept. We've had, I remember reading about a story where this lady had 7 DUIs. 7. And the judge just kept letting her go. I'm sorry, but when things like that happen, where judges just let people go because of whatever reason, who knows, they should be held responsible for the aftermath of whatever that person does from that point on. And if judges and courts don't like what I'm saying, let's be very clear. I don't care. You were put in a position for a reason, to uphold the law, not to, play wet nurse to someone who has a sob story. They knew the rules when they signed to get their license. Read the terms and conditions. Oh, there's that word again, terms and conditions. They knew it. It even says, do you understand these rights? Do you understand these rules? If you don't and you don't sign it, you don't get your license. But if you do sign it, even if you didn't read it, contract law will say, well, you signed paperwork. Even if you didn't read it, you signed it saying that you basically consented to whatever the terms and conditions were. So imagine my surprise when I hear about there's people on the road who have multiple violations against public safety. Because that's essentially what that is, right? You're knowingly, willingly getting into a vehicle that you know you shouldn't be driving because you're intoxicated. And you putting people's lives in danger. How is that okay? What's interesting is I'm very bold, unapologetic about where my stance is in life. And I have the conversations with my cousin in my ear going, you shouldn't be saying these things on social media, especially if you want a job in law. And I'm just like, no, I'm going to say it because people need to understand where I stand when it comes to the law. See, I don't like our criminal justice system, and the reason why I don't like it is because it's for criminals. It's justice for criminals. It used to be justice for victims, but now it's justice for criminals. So unless you can prove me wrong, that's where I stand. So let's talk about term limits. What do you think is an appropriate amount for term limits for president, VP, governors, Congress? Because, you could say, 2 years, but you can't really do much with 2 years. Because, as you've seen, historically, that every time a new president gets back into office, or into office at all, they now have to go over all the crap laws that the previous administration put forth, and if they disagree with them, they have to unravel them. And that takes time. You can't just wave a wand and say, all right, this is gone. No, there's a process, and the process takes sometimes years. And so same thing at the state level, in order to enact change, real change, there has to be a fair amount of years that they can attack or assess, analyze, assess, and then put out a plan to go forward, and that takes time. So what do you think is a good respectful term limit for politicians at the state level, the city level, the national level? I'm just curious. What are your thoughts on that? Please don't be hateful. It's just a conversation to have. That's all. I'm not really here to debate you. I'm just putting a conversation in the air that people, I think, need to have. Especially as Americans, we need to start talking about why politicians have excessive amounts of time in office, especially when they're not getting things done. They're there for their own selfish crap, and it needs to stop.